is up, everyone? Lame Dev back here. So today we are going to be back with episode 2 of our Python beginner series, and today we are going to be covering inputs with Python. So if you don't know anything about variables, anything about regular print statements, I recommend checking the previous video because we went over that, and they will be really useful for this video. So without further ado, let's get started. So the first thing with inputs is inputs allow a person to type something into the terminal. For example, we could ask someone how old they are, so we can make a variable called age, which would store the age that the user types in. So age is equal to input, and we could say how old are you, and then they could type that here. If we run that, we will get how old are you. We could just return anything like 19, something like that. And then it's the same thing with age or name, anything like that. So if we were to actually make a program that asks a user how old they are, what their name is, we could make something like this. We're going to want to create a variable named name, which could store the user's name. So let's do that. And we're going to type input. This is what gets the user's input right here. And then we're going to put quotations inside, and we're going to type what we're asking. So we can say, hello, what is your name? And then they can type that in. And then we can do the same thing with age. We can create a variable called age, input, and then we could say, excuse my typing. There you go. So this will ask the user for their age, or it'll ask in order for the user for their name and their age. So what we're going to do is, once we get their name and age, we can print something like this. So when we print, we can also, there's something called a formatted string, where we type F, and then we put quotations. So what this does is it allows us to type variables inside our quotes to make it much easier and more efficient when printing things. So we could say hello and then their name, but we don't know their name, right? So we're going to put the variable of their name because that's where their name got stored. So if I put Jeff, Jeff got stored in name. So we can put Jeff, but we can't just put name like that, because if I run that, it's just going to say hello name. This is why the F string comes in handy. We can put the curly braces, which allow me to type a variable. This is where we pass in name, the variable, and then now it'll return hello Jeff. And then we can say you are, and then age, years old. So if we were to run that, we could say Jeff, say 19, and here we would get, hello Jeff, you are 19 years old. It's pretty simple. Now let's combine some math into this program. So we're going to ask the user for their name, so we can actually keep that there. Then we're also going to ask the user for their age, so we could actually keep the age here. But we want to tell them how many years away they are from 100 years old. So we could create a separate variable that contains the number 100, and we could also do the math inside of that variable. So we could create the variable name as years away. Note that in Python, when naming our variables with like multiple words, we separate them with underscores. So we're going to say years away is equal to 100, because how many years away they are from 100, minus their age. And that will give us how many years they are away. So like if I put 20, it would return 80. So now we could do something like print hello. Could create this as an F string, and then we could say hello name, you are age, and you would simply just put years away from 100. So that's how we combined some math, because we just did a simple subtraction. But the thing is, when we run this program, we're going to get an error. Let's show you why we get an error. So if I put Jeff, and if I put 19, we're going to get an error. Why is that? It's because when we put an input, we're getting a string. Basically what we're typing is a string. You see how we type 19? This is what the computer interpreted it as a string, but the computer needs to interpret this as an integer. So how do we make the computer interpret this as an integer? It's quite simple. All we have to do is type int, and then put brackets around this. So surround your input with brackets, and now that'll cast that as an integer. Now let's run the program and see what happens. There you go. You were 81 from 100. But we could actually fix that and say years away. There we go. There you go. Hello, Jeff. You are 19 years old and 81 years away from 100. So that's how we fix that problem right there. So yeah, that's basically inputs in Python. It's really simple, and you can do a lot of fun things with it. So I'm going to challenge you guys to make a program where there's an input that has the user is going to buy a certain amount of apples, oranges, and I don't know, hamburgers. So they're all going to have set prices. And what we need to do is the user is going to be inputting how many he's buying from each, correct? And the user has a certain amount of funds in his account. We want to print out how many funds he has left after he bought each of those items. So if I bought 2 apples, 1 hamburger, and 3 oranges, how much money will I have left in my account? So let's make the user have $100 in his account, and we can set the apple to whatever you want, and we can set the oranges to whatever you want, set hamburger to whatever you want. It doesn't matter. So pause the video and try to find the solution. Alright, so here's the solution if you needed help. So let's create 3 variables, one for apple, and set that to $5, one for orange. I'm going to make this a float to make things a bit more interesting, and one for hamburger. Let's make that like $4.50. So we're going to ask the user how many apples did they buy, how many oranges did you buy, and how many hamburgers did you buy. So let's do that. So we can say, we can make a variable called apples bought, and make that equal to an integer, because they are going to be typing in an integer instead of a string. And then we're going to be typing input, because we're trying to get an input from the user, and then we can say, how many apples did you buy? And they will enter their number there. So we're going to do the same thing, oranges bought equals int input. I'm just going to copy what's in here and change the name. Oranges did you buy? Same thing, hamburgers. You can just change this to hamburgers bought. And we can change this to hamburgers. So the user is going to be typing in 3 integers. So let's run the program right now just to make sure it works. Because good programmers always run their code to make sure their code works. You don't want to just type 1,000 lines and then run your code, have like 6 different errors and not know where they are. So seems like everything's working so far. How many apples did you buy? 2, 3, 4. That's great. Now we need to create a variable for the account funds because he had $100 in his account. Let's fix that. So what we're going to be doing is some simple math. So we could make 3 different variables again to do the math automatically and store that in those variables and then print it. Or we could just print it out. What I would prefer to do is do the math in the variables and print them out so it looks nicer. So we're going to do that way. So if we want to find out how much money was spent on the apples, you would just do money equals, or money on apples, so we can be more specific with our variables. Actually, let's make that spent. We're basically going to be doing 5, or we can type apples, times the amount of apples bought, right? But since Python, I just realized, made a mistake here. Since Python executes its code in order like this, we're going to have to make our 3 variables at the bottom here. So apples bought. So what this does is basically it takes apple, which is equal to 5, and let's say they bought 3 apples, it'll be doing 5 times 3, which is equal to 15. So he spent $15 on apples. So it's the exact same thing. Spent on orange is equal to orange times oranges bought. Same thing. Spent on hamburgers is equal to hamburger times hamburgers bought. So let's print out his remaining funds. So we're going to use a print statement to print out his remaining funds, but not only that, we're going to use a formatted string so it can make our lives easier when putting in the variable of the remaining funds. So we can make a variable here called remaining funds. Remaining funds. That's going to be equal to his current account funds minus what he spent on apples, minus what he spent on oranges, minus what he spent on hamburgers. That's all you're doing. Don't worry if this seems like too much for you. It's just breaking down the code. What I find helps me is taking a piece of paper and breaking down these problems into smaller problems, like smaller tasks, and then carrying them out. So don't get too stressed if you're not understanding everything we're doing. So we're using a print statement with a formatted string, and then what we're going to do is we're going to say funds remaining. We could put a $sign right here, and then we're going to do remaining funds. And let's run this program. How many apples did you buy? 5. How many oranges did you buy? 5. How many hamburgers did you buy? 5. So the funds remaining in his account is $32.55. And it's that simple. So that's the solution to this problem. If you were able to figure this out, congratulations. If not, that's okay. That's no problem. So next video we're going to be covering if statements, because what if the user types in a number for this program right here, it's too large. That'll lead him in the negative for funds. Like let's say I type 20. I bought 20 apples. And I bought 20 oranges. That's negative $169.80. So in the next video, we're going to be covering how to solve this problem.